Hi there, this is Clifford Bates, and I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Montesquieu's Spirit of the Laws. Today we're doing Book 16 on how the laws of domestic slavery are related to nature of climate. It is the third book within part 3 of the Spirit of the Laws. All these these books are dealing with climate and geography in the way that the climate and geography and location play in shaping the nature of human behavior and therefore shaping the way the government, what type of governments are possible, and what kind of the type of governments that they have. Okay, so today we're looking at domestic slavery. And domestic slavery is slavery within the household. That control the room of the master, the room of the household. It deals with also the question of relations with, uh, uh, servants, but also with children and with wives and things like this, right? Um, Chapter 1, Domestic Servitude. Slaves are established for the family rather than in the family. So, in other words, the slaves are established for the family rather than in the family. Thus, I shall distinguish their servitude, from that in which women are held in some countries, and which I shall call domestic servitude proper. So, therefore, this idea that some countries that the idea of women are simply as domestic servants, right? And the question of domestic servitude, what is meant by domestic servitude? And he's going to distinguish between what is properly domestic servitude and how women, in some countries, women are treated in that sense. That in the countries of the South, there is a natural inequality between the sexes, right? In the South, he says the southern countries with hotter climates, and I said there's a natural inequality. Women are marriageable in hot climates at 9, 10, and in other words, 8, 9, 10 years of age. Thus, childhood and marriage almost always go together there. They are old at 20. Thus, reason in women is never found where beauty. This is one of those things. Thus, reason in women is never found with beauty there in the South. This young, pretty, young little girls. This is where beauty is held to be. When beauty demands, when beauty demands empire, reason refuses it. Where reason could achieve it, beauty exists no longer. So the very analogy, right? The idea when beauty demands empire, control, power, and association, reason doesn't reason. They don't have the reason to do it. Right? Reason refuses it. And when reason can achieve it, beauty is no longer. Women should be held in dependence, for reason cannot procure for them in their old age an empire that beauty did not give them in their youth. Ooh, women should be held in dependence, for reason cannot procure for them in their old age that empire, that control, that beauty did not give them in their youth. Therefore, when reason does not oppose it, it is very simple. It is very simple there for a man to leave his wife to take another, and for polygamy to be introduced. So again, these hot climates. In temperate countries where women's charms are better preserved, where they become marriageable later, and where they have children at more advanced age, their husbands' old age more or less follows on their own, and they have more reasons and more knowledge when they marry. It is, if only because they have lived longer. A kind of equality between the two sexes has naturally been introduced, and consequently, the law permitting only a single wife. So again, this is a very interesting point about the hot climate, cold climate, different realities of how men will treat women, and marriageability, and when they do become marriageable and things like that. And that's a very interesting point about that he raises here about this question that how that and therefore it's a very about the, okay. Now next continues in cold countries. The almost necessity of use of strong drink establish intemperance among the men, so women who have a natural reserve in this respect, because they must always defend themselves, have an advantage of reason over the men. Okay, because men drink, then women it's better not to drink because they preserve themselves, defend themselves against the advantage, against man, reserve against defend themselves against the advances by men. Um, have more reason than men in that sense, right? This is the Irish woman versus the Irish man, right? The dominant, that's the famous stereotypes of this, right? Nature, which has distinguished men by strength and by reason, has put no term to their power, but the term of their strength and their reason. She has given women charms and has wanted their ascendancy to end with these charms. But in hot countries, these are found only at the beginning and never through the course of their lives. So therefore, this is the idea that therefore the climate and the climate and the way the climate affects things. Now, technology will change this. Technology will allow the conquest of climate. Think of air conditioning and things like this, right? Um, Thus, the law permitting only one wife has more relation to the physical aspect of the climate of Europe than to the physical aspect of the climate of Asia. It is one of the reasons why Mohammedanism found it so easy to establish itself in Asia and so difficult to spread in Europe, and why Christianity has been able to maintain itself in India and destroyed in Asia, and why it finally, and why finally the Mohammedans make so much progress in China and the Christians so little. Human reason are always subordinated to the supreme. Human reasons are always subordinated to that supreme cause that does not at all that does all to that supreme cause that does all that it wants and makes use of whatever it wants. So therefore, things that certain things on there for desire, nature, and these things. And human reason are always subordinate to that real supreme cause. Therefore, desire and things like beauty and things like impulse that does all that it wants and makes use of whatever it wants. Certain reasons, particular to Valentinian, made him allow polygamy in the empire. That law, which was violent for our climate, was removed by Theodotus, Arcadius, and Honorius, the later Roman emperors. Chapter 3. Having made multiple wives, having multiple wives depends greatly on the support of them, right? Although a large number of wives depends much on the husband's wealth in countries where polygamy has been established, still one cannot say that wealth causes the establishment of polygamy in a state. Poverty can have the same effect, as I shall say when speaking of savages. Okay? In other words, there must be some other reason for this: the climate, the climate, the things. In powerful nations, polygamy is less a luxury than an occasion for great luxury. In hot climates, one has fewer needs. It costs less to support a wife and children. Therefore, a number of wives can one the number of wives one can have is greater there. So therefore, the hotter climates, the cost, the needs to feed into this are lesser than in the warmer, the cooler climates, more moderate climates. Therefore, they have one more. It's easier to have a number more children, families there, right? Chapter 4 on polygamy. So, what is about the slaves? First, he said he's going to talk about domestic servitude proper, but now he talks on women. Okay, he switched the subject. Okay. Accordingly to calculations, on polygamy in various circumstances. According to calculations made by various places in Europe, more boys are born than girls, whereas accounts from Asia and Africa tell us more girls are born than boys. Therefore, the law permitting only a single wife in Europe and the ones permitting several in Asia and in Africa had certain relation to the climate. In cold climates, in the cold climates of Asia, as in Europe, are uh, uh, are more boys are born than girls. This is to say, Lamus, the reason for the law in cold countries that allow a woman here to have several husbands. Right. But I do not believe that there are many countries where the disproportion is so great that it requires the introduction of a law permitting several wives or permitting several husbands. It means only it, it means only that having many wives or many husbands is not far from nature is certain countries than as in others. In other words, is not far from nature in certain countries than others. I admit that if what the account tells us is true, that in Baton there are 10 women for every man, it would be very particular. It would be very it would be a very particular case of polygamy. In all of this, I do not justify usages. I give reasons for them. In other words, he's defending himself. I'm not justifying it. I'm just giving reasons. I don't justify why this polygamy and things like this. I'm just explaining why it happens. What are the reasons for it? Chapter 5, a reason for the law of Malabar. On the coast of Malabar, in the caste of the Nairs, men can only have one wife, whereas a woman can have several husbands. I believe one can discover the origin of this custom. The Nair are a caste of nobles who are the soldiers of all these nations, the warriors. In Europe, one keeps soldiers from marrying. In Europe, one keeps soldiers from marrying. In Malabar, the demands of the climate are great. One has been content to make marriage as slight an encumbrance as possible for them. One wife has been given to several men, which diminishes to the degree the attachment to a family, and the cares of a household leaves these people their military spirit. So therefore, they do this to what? So that they don't create. They have no attachment. They have no. Therefore, the climate makes it possible for them. One wife has been given to several men, which diminishes the degree that the attachment to a family and the cares for the household leaves these people what the military spirit still is able to fight these soldiers. Chapter 6 on polygamy itself. Considering polygamy in general, independent of the circumstances that can make it tolerable, it is not useful to mankind or to either of the sexes, either to the one which abuses it or to the one abused. Nor is it useful to children. And one of its major drawbacks is the father and mother cannot have the same affection for their children. A father cannot love 20 children as a mother loves two. It is much worse when a woman has several husbands, for when paternal love depends on the opinion which a father can believe he wants, or which other can believe that certain children belong to him. In other words, the idea, this is why polygamy, polygamy is not good. You see this in the black family, right? This is what happens in the many daddy mommies, many baby daddies, with different baby daddies, right? There's what they have the family itself, the bond between the mother. The mother is dominant, but there's no paternal role model that shapes it, and that but they don't have the same ones. They have no, they don't. In other words, this is not efficient, and it leads to the breakdown of the situation. It is said that the king of Morocco has in his surigos harem white women, black women, and yellow women. The unfortunate man scarcely needs a color. Possessing many wives does not always prevent one from desiring the wife of another. With avarice, as with luxury, thirst increases with the acquisition of treasures. In the time of Justinian, many philosophers who had been hampered by Christianity withdrew to the court of Kieros in Persia. Right, this is that Justinian was the kind of like you know um, who had been hampered by the philosophers who had been Christianity. This that they left to this court of Persia. What struck them most, said Agathes, was that the people to whom polygamy was permitted did not even abstain from adultery. Having multiple wives Who would guess it leads to the love that nature disavows? Lesbianism, homosexuality. In other words, having multiple wives, who would guess it, leads to the love of nature disavows. This is because one sort of dissoluteness always entails another. Mm. So much for, contemporary Western conceptions of sexuality. During the revolution of Constantinople, when the Sultan of Men was deposed, on the counts told that the people pillaging the house of the Kea found not a single woman. They say that it had come to the point that the most of the Seregos of Algiers have no women. In other words, that they're young boys. Okay, they say that it come to the point that most of the Seregos in Algiers have no women. Okay, so this is like, oh, boys, little boys become the thing, right? Of equality of treatment in the case of multiple wives. Chapter 7. From the laws concerning multiple wives follows the law concerning their treatment. Muhammad, who permits 4, wants everything to be equal among them: food, clothing, and conjugal duty. This law also established in the Maldives, where one can have 3 wives. The law of Moses even wants the man married by his father to a slave, who later marries a free woman, to deny nothing in clothing, food, and duties. One could give more to the new wife, but the first was not to have less. So, therefore, this is this idea that each one of these, the idea that you had to treat them equally, and that you could not treat them. You had to make sure they had something. On chapter 8, and the separation of women from men. One of the consequences of polygamy is that in the rich and voluptuous nations, one has a very great number of wives. Their separation from the men and their enclosure naturally follows from their great number. Domestic order requires it to be so. So an insolvent debtor seeks to hide from the pursuit of his creditors, right? In these climates in which the physical aspect has such strength that morality can do practically nothing. So the climates where physical aspect has such strength, the physical aspects of sex and things like that have such great strength that morality can do nothing. Leave a man with a woman. A temptation is a fall. Attack is sure. Resistance is no. In these countries, there must be bolted doors instead of precepts. No, there must be restraints, not laws and mores, not just rules or habits. In China's classics considered it a prodigy of virtue for a man to be alone in a distant apartment with a woman and not do violence to her. Chapter 9, a link between domestic government and politics. In republics, the conditions of citizens is limited, equal, gentle, and moderate. The effects of public liberty are felt throughout. Empire over women could not be well exercised. And when climate required this empire, the government of one alone was the most suitable. This is one of the reasons it always had been difficult to establish popular government in the East. So, in other words, he's saying that Republican government requires a certain equality that would not be able to tolerate a kind of empire of the women. It doesn't handle that well. It won't last well. And therefore, because the climate of the East, the argument goes, leads to this situation that leads to multiple wives to some degree, every degree, and that the religion of the East that promoted that. In other words, he's saying the reason why Christianity didn't do well in the East, whereas Islam did, is because one put up with one the latter didn't put up with polygamy, and the other one didn't. The other one that suited the climate. And this explains why popular government is difficult to establish. On the other hand, the servitude of women is very much in conformity with the genius of despotic government, which likes to abuse everything. Thus, in Asia, domestic domestic servitude and despotic government have been seen to go hand in every age. In a government in which one requires tranquility above all, and in the extreme subordination it calls peace, women must be enclosed. Their intrigues would be dangerous, disastrous for the husband. A government that has not the time to examine the conduct of its subjects is suspicious of it simply because it appears and makes itself felt. Let us assume for the moment that the fickleness of spirit and the indiscretion of our women, that pleases and displeases them, their passions, both great and small, were transferred to an Eastern government, along with the activity, liberty they have among us. What a father of a family could be tranquil for a moment? Suspect everywhere, enemies everywhere. The state would be shaken. One would see rivers of blood flowing. You took the situation of the Western women in the West, in the court, and brought it over to the East. It would be a disaster, he's saying, right? There would be um, uh, uh, what what father or family could be tranquil for a moment? Suspect everywhere, enemies everywhere. The state would be shaken. One would see rivers of blood flowing. Chapter 10, the principle of morality in the East. In the case of multiple wives, the more is the family wives, the more the family ceases to be a unity. The more the law should reunite the dispatched parts to a center, and the more various interests, the more various the interests, the better it is for the laws to return them to one interest. So therefore, if you're going to have in the East, you need the laws to bring everyone together. They're divided. This was chiefly done by enclosure. Wives should not be separate. Not wives should not only be separated from men by their enclosure in the house, but they should also be separated within that same enclosure, so that each one becomes a perfect family within the family. Uh, women's uh, uh, entire prac- women's entire practice of morality, modesty, chastity, discretion, peace, silence, peace, dependency, respect, love, derives from this. So, in other words, the women's entire practice of morality, modesty, there is this enclosure, this family, this separateness, this oneness. In some, here their feelings are universally directed to that which is best for the world by its nature, but which is the one exclusive attachment to one family. So this one is one family, and therefore you have to have that. You enclose them, but you enclose them also separately in each one their own family. Um, this is the only way to do that. This is how the laws have to regulate this. And otherwise, what will happen is that the family would be not. There's no common thing, no structure. Everything will go everywhere, and therefore they will lead to degeneracy. They will lead to, instead of being the virtues. In other words, instead of these becoming these virtues or these things, their opposites will happen. He suggests. By nature, women have to perform so many duties proper to them that one cannot separate them enough from everything that could give them other ideas, from everything that one treats as amusements, and from everything one calls business. So therefore, this is the problem: is that the argument here is that women have so many obligations in the structure of what they do, the goods that they do, and therefore you have to be careful that cannot separate it from what the family and these things do, and the effect. In other words, the things they do in the family also provide civil goods that the society requires. And that if you call them to amusements and everything one calls everything, in other words, give them other ideas from everything one treats as amusements and from everything one calls business. In various states of the East, the mores are pure as the enclosure of women is stricter. In large states, they are necessary great lords. The greater their means, the more they are in a position to keep women in strict enclosure and prevent them from returning to society. This is why women have such admirable mores in the empire of the Turks, Persians, Mongols, and China, and Japan. One cannot say the same in the Indies, which has been divided into infinity of little states by the infinite number of islands and the situation of the terrain. which has rendered despotic a great number of by a great number of causes that I have no time to record here. There only the destitute plunder, and only the destitute are plundered. Those whom one calls important men have only scant means. Those whom one calls rich men have scarcely more than their sustenance. The enclosure of women cannot be strict there. One cannot take such careful precautions to contain them. Their mores are inconceivably corrupt. In that there is that it is there that one sees the point to which the vice of climate, left in great liberty, can create disorder. There nature has a strength, and modesty a weakness that is incomprehensible. In Pratai, women's lust is so great that men are constrained to make a kind of rigging shield to themselves from women's enterprises. According to Mr. Smith, things are no better in the kingdom of Guinea. It seems that in these countries, the two sexes loses everything, including the laws proper to them. So therefore, that lust is so great that they need to. In other words, that the two sexes lose everything, including the laws proper to them. Chapter 11 on domestic servitude independent of polygamy. In certain places in the East, it is not only multiple wives that require their enclosure. It is the climate. Those who read of the horrors, crimes, and perdiferes, atrocities, poisons, and murders caused by the liberty of women in Goa, and in the establishments of the Portuguese and the Indies, where religion permits only one wife. And who will compare these to the innocence and purities of the mores of the wives in Turkey and Persia, or among the Mongols in China and in Japan, will see that it is often necessary to separate women from men when there is only one wife, as is when there are many. It is the climate that should decide these things. What would be the use of enclosing wives in northern countries, where their mores are naturally good, where all their passions are calm, scarcely active, scarcely refined, where love has such a regulated empire over the heart that the slightest police is sufficient to lead them. In other words, this idea that the northern climate, because of the climate, and also because of things, there's what the passions are calmer, the passions are moderated. Remember back what he said in the previous chapter, two books ago. Sorry. Their passions are calm. They're scarcely active and scarcely refined. Right, where love is regulated, has a regulated empire over the heart, that the slightest police, the slightest, regulations or oversight is sufficient to lead them. The slightest kind of social mores and social enforcement is able to lead. One is fortunate to live in these climates that allow communication between people, where the sex with the most charms seem to adorn society, and where women, keeping themselves for the pleasure of one man, yet serve the diversion of all. Right. This is the line of a moderate climate, moderate government. Right. Chapter 12 on natural modesty. All nations are equally agreed in attaching scorn to the incontinence of women. This is because nature has spoken to all nations. She has established defense, she has established attack, and having put desire in both sides, she has permitted timidity on this in the one and shame in the other. She has given individuals long periods of time to preserve themselves, and only brief moments for their perpetuation. So, in other words, nature has given them windows of breeding. Right, they can survive a long time, but the breeding, when they can breed, she's put what mechanisms that they desire. They placed timidity on one thing and shame on the other. Right. Therefore, it is not true that incontinence follows the laws of nature. On the contrary, it violates them. In other words, incontinence is not. Incontinence mean here is that not being immoderate. In other words, falling into abuse of sex. Here, right? Is follows the law of nature. On the contrary, it violates them. It is modesty and discretion that follows these laws. Besides, it is in the nature of intelligent beings to feel their imperfections. In other words, his very point that intelligent beings should understand. It is in the nature of intelligent beings, people of intelligence, to feel their imperfection or understand their imperfections. Therefore, nature has given us modesty, that is, shame for our imperfections. Right? Therefore, when physical power of certain climates violates the natural law of the two sexes, and that of intelligent beings, so therefore the laws of the sexes and also the being, it is for the legislature to make civil laws which forcefully oppose the nature of the climate. So therefore, you have to, this is the wise legislator, to forcefully oppose the nature of the climate and to establish the primitive laws of nature and reason. Okay. Now, chapter 13 on jealousy. Among people, one must distinguish between jealousy that comes from passion and jealousy from custom, mores, and laws. So there's two types of jealousy. Jealousies that are created from passions, right, the internal desires and wants, and then jealousy that arise because you have been the culture creates those, the culture, mores, and laws of this. In the former, these nature ones, the passion, is an ardent fever that devours. So therefore, if it comes from the passion, this is like a fever, ardent fever that devours. And the latter, cold, but sometimes terrible, can be joined to indifference and scorn. In other words, it's cold. It's not hot. It's cold. But sometimes terrible, can also be joined with indifference and scorn. Right? The first, which is abusive love, is born of love itself. Okay, this is like the jealousy and like this. The other depends solely on mores and natural manners, the laws of the country, the morality, and sometimes even the religion. Right? Jealousy is always the result of the physical force of the climate, and it is the remedy for this physical force. So jealousy is always the climate. Therefore, this is the question of this: when do you want it to happen? In other words, it is the remedy for this physical force too, as well. It is the product of is a result of the physical force of the climate, and is also the remedy of this force in that sense. Chapter 14 on household government in the East. One changes wives in the East so frequently that the domestic government there cannot be theirs. The frequency that the domestic government cannot be theirs. Therefore, the eunuchs are put in charge of it. They are given all the keys, and they arrange the business of the house. In Persia and Chardin, wives are given their clothing as it would be given to children. Thus, that concern which seems to suit them so well, that concerns which everywhere else is the first of their concern, is not theirs. So therefore, this is because wives are so interchangeable, change frequently, government of the household, domestic government cannot be put in their hands. Therefore, eunuchs are put in charge. So therefore, they're treated like children. Women are treated as children are treated. Where therefore the thing that they're everywhere else that women are suited to do, that governing the household and being in charge of domestic government, governing the household, ruling the household, they're not doing that in theirs. Chapter 15 on divorce and repudiation. A difference between divorce and repudiation is that divorce occurs by mutual consent and on the occasion of mutual incompatibility, where repudiation is done by the will and for the advantage of one of the two parties, independently of the will and the advantage of the other. Right. So his idea of divorce requires mutual dissolution, and repudiation is one does it against the interest and the will of the other. It is sometimes so, and It is sometimes so necessary for wives to repudiate their husbands, and and always so trying for them to do it, that it is a hard law that gives this right to men without giving it to their wives. A husband is the master of the house. He has 1,000 ways to hold his wives to their duty or to return them to it. And it seems in his hands repudiation is only a new abuse of his power. But a wife who repudiates her husband exercises only a sad remedy. It, it is always a great misfortune for her to be constrained to go back and to look for a second husband when she has lost most of her charms while married to another. One of the advantages of youthful charms in wives is that as an age advances, the husband is inclined to kindness by memory of his pleasures. Right? So that's why this is the memory of his pleasures. Therefore, it is a general rule that in all countries where the law grants men the facility of repudiation, it should also grant it to wives. Further, in the climates where wives live in domestic slavery, it seems that the law should permit wives' repudiations and husbands' divorce only. When wives are in a siligo, husbands cannot repudiate one of them because of the incompatibility of the mores. It is the husband's fault if the mores are incompatible. In other words, the incompatibility of the mores. It's the husband's fault of this. A husband cannot repudiate one of them because of the incompatibility of mores. In other words, the husband didn't regulate things right. Repudiation by reason of barrenness can only occur in the case of a single wife. When one has several wives, this reason is not of any importance for the husband. Okay? So repudiation by barrenness only makes sense when you have single wives. When there's not single wives, that cannot be the reason for it. He argues. Let's see. The laws of the Maldi allows one to take back a wife one has repudiated. The laws of the Maldi allow one to take back a wife. The laws of Mexico prohibit them from coming back together on the penalty of death. Okay, the laws of Mexico was more sensible than the laws of the Maldives. Even at the time of dissolving the marriage, the Mexican law thought about its eternity, where the laws of the Maldives seems to trifle equally with marriage and repudiation. The Mexican law granted divorce. The Mexican law granted divorce only. This was an additional reason not to allow people to reunite who had voluntarily separated. Repudiation seems rather to stem from a quirkiness of spirit and some spirit of the soul. Divorce seems, repudiation seems to quirkiness. Divorce seems to be a matter of counsel. So repudiation seems a matter of quickness of spirit and some passion of the soul, or divorce seems to be counsel. Ordinary divorce has great political utility, as for its civil utility, it is established for the husband and the wife, and is not always favorable to the children. So therefore, that's the problem. And is not always favorable. Divorce is not favorable to the children. It has utility for this. It has been established for the husband and the wife. It has the civil utility for this in that sense, right? Chapter 16 on the repudiation and divorce among the Romans. Romulus allowed the husband to repudiate his wife if she committed adultery, prepared poison, or tampered with the keys. He did not give the wives the right to repudiate the husbands. Plutarch calls this a very harsh law. As the laws of Athens gave the wife as well as the husband the faculty of repudiating, and as one sees that wives had obtained this right among the earliest Romans despite the laws of Romulus, it is clear that this institution was one of those brought from Athens by the Roman deputies, and that it was put into the laws of the 12 tables. Cicero says that the cause of repudiation came from the laws of the 12 tables. Therefore, one cannot doubt that this law had increased the number of causes for repudiation established by Romulus. The faculty of divorce was also a provision, at least a consequence of the law of the 12 tables. For as soon as a wife or a husband separately had right of repudiation, they would all the more be able to separate by agreement and by mutual will. The law did not require the law did not require one to give any causes for divorce. This is because, by the nature of thing, there must be causes for repudiation and not for divorce. And when the law establishes cause that can dissolve a marriage, mutual incompatibility is the strongest of all. Right? So therefore, once you have law for dissolution of marriage, therefore you don't, repudiation requires a cause against the will of the other party. And you also get the advantage of the other party. Divorce is mutual divide. Therefore, if there's mutual divide, there's no need. Just mutual compatibility becomes the strongest of all. Dionysius of Hyrcanatus, Valerius Maximus, and Aldus Guinness report a fact that does not seem probable to me. They say that although Rome had the faculty of repudiating one wife, there was such respect for the auspices that in 520 years no one had used this right until Carvus Rega repudiated his wife as a consequence of her barrenness. But simply knowing the nature of the human spirit, nature of the human spirit is to feel what a prodigy it would be if the law that had given the whole people such a right was used by no one. Right? In other words, he doesn't believe it. He said that this happened. It wasn't used for 520 years, and it does happen because of her barrenness. But knowing human nature and if you had such a right, it'd be used, right? Coriolanus, on going into exile, consoled his wife to marry a happier man than himself. He would. We have just seen that the law of the 12 tables and the mores of the Romans greedily extended the laws of greedily extended the laws of Romulus. Why would there be these extensions if one has never used the faculty of repudiating? Moreover, if the citizens had such respect for the auspices that they never repudiated their wives, why would the Roman legislatures have had less? Right? Right? The auspices wouldn't allow them. Why would the legislators have it? How did the law constantly corrupt the mores? Right? It's unlikely, I'd say. By comparing the two passages in Plutarch, one sees the element of marvel in the fact in question, despair. The element of marvel in the fact of question, despair. The royal law permitting the husband to repudiate in the three cases mentioned. And it wanted, as says Plutarch, anyone who repudiated in one of these cases to be obliged to give half his goods to the wife and to dedicate the other half to Ceres. Therefore, one could repudiate in any case by submitting to the penalty. No one did that before Carolyn, who, as Plutarch goes on to say, repudiated his life for barrenness in 230 years after Romulus, that he repudiated her 71 years before the laws of the 12 tables, which extended the power to repudiate as well as the causes for repudiation. In other words, if you had to repudiate, you had to give give half his goods to the wife, and you had to dedicate the other half to Ceres, to God. So there was, well, who's going to repudiate in that case? In that sense, and you can repudiate, but the cost of doing so is huge, and therefore that's why of this, right? And repudiated 71 years before the laws of the 12 tables. The author to whom I've referred says that Carvilius Regulus loved his wife, but that because of her barrenness, the censors made him take an oath that he would repudiate her so that she could give children to the Republic. and that this made him odious to the people. In other words, in other words, he loved his wife, but because her barrenness, the censors made him take an oath that he would repudiate her so that she could give children to the republic, and that this made him odious to the people. The genius of the Roman people must be known in order to reveal the true cause of the hatred they conceive for Carus. Carus did not fall into disgrace with the people from repudiating his wife. That is the thing that did not disturb them. But Carus had sworn an oath to the censors that, having given the barrenness of his wife, he would repudiate her in order to give children to the republic. The people saw that this was a yoke that the censor was going to put on them. I shall show later in this work the repugnance they always had for such regulations. But where could such a contradiction between these authors have begun? Here Plutarch examines a fact, and the others have told a marvel. So therefore, that's the thing that, in other words, a marvel, something they told a marvel, something that's rare, but a fact that happened in that sense. So, okay, that's how he ends it, and this is how we end. I suspect, yeah, we end the book. So, okay, if you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and when I see them, I will answer them. If you like it, forward on and share it on social media. Share it with a friend, email or other mechanism, or tell them about it. If you have not subscribed, please subscribe. If you can encourage others to subscribe, let's grow the channel a little bit. Let's grow over the 300 number. It would be good. Now, if you didn't like it, if something you felt wrong about it, you didn't like the video, thought something was wrong with it, maybe the fan's too loud. I got the fans up, maybe the background noise is loud. Because if I didn't have the fan, we couldn't go out and suffocate in here, honestly. So if you please put in the comment what was wrong about this. I know what's wrong, but maybe we'll learn something. If I say something about the text or something about the thing. Another thing you can do is if you want to follow me on social media, those of you who want to follow me on social media can follow the links below. If you want to help me, if you want to contribute to help me doing these kind of things, monetarily, or you can do so by subscribe to our Patreon below, or by buying any of my books. I understand that you're going to say Patreon, don't do anything for us. You're giving it for free anyways. I'm doing it I'm doing this already. Maybe you want to reward me for doing these things. It'd be nice. Okay. That's it. Okay. We again, these videos, the Montesquieu videos, are going to be posted Mondays and Wednesdays. The other posts, I was doing Schmidt. Now I'm going to be doing something else. Maybe Kojab, maybe not Kojab. I've been thinking about it. The next video, next time we meet, and then Fridays are kind of on hold right now. Normally Fridays will be a live stream, but we've had some problems with the live stream, and I have to arrange that it gets done. Solve the problems. We'll see what happens. We'll try it. I'm waiting off to July. There'll probably be none until July because of something. But that's it. That leads us to where we're at the stage where we're done. So I'll see you next time when we go to chapter. I think chapter 16 or something. What is it? Let's go. Yeah, chapter 17. So that's it. Well, take care. Bye-bye, and have a good day.